Hey Reddit, I never thought I'd be writing here, but I need to get this off my chest. My name's James, and I'm 40 years old. I've been married to my wife, Sarah, for about 12 years. We've had what I thought was a solid relationship, or at least, that's what I believed until recently. I thought we were partners, best friends, and had each other's backs no matter what. I'm not naive enough to think things are always perfect, but I trusted her. I never once doubted her loyalty. Things started feeling off about 6 months ago. Sarah became different. I can't quite put my finger on it, but there was a noticeable shift. She began going out more often with her friends, taking extra care with her appearance. She'd buy new clothes, get her hair done, and spend what felt like hours doing her makeup for a casual girls' night. I figured she deserved to have fun and relax, so I didn't question it. Maybe I was just overthinking things, right? But then, her behavior started to get even stranger. She'd guard her phone like it held state secrets, constantly taking it with her everywhere, even to the bathroom. She'd laugh at messages late at night, claiming it was just her friends being silly. She brushed off my questions and told me I was paranoid when I asked who she was chatting with so late. I tried to tell myself that I was being insecure. Sarah was the outgoing one, the life of the party, and I'd always been the laid-back, trusting husband. But even so, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Little did I know, my instincts were screaming at me for a reason. The tipping point came one night when Sarah told me she was going to a friend's birthday party. She had that familiar sparkle in her eyes, and she was dressed in a way that made me do a double take. It wasn't her usual casual, friendly look. It was something more suggestive. She assured me it was just harmless fun, that it was one night and nothing more. She even joked, "Don't wait up, James," as she walked out the door. But something about that night gnawed at me. I couldn't sleep, couldn't relax. The doubt that had been growing inside me for months finally pushed me over the edge. I needed to know what was really going on, so I decided to check her social media and phone records. I didn't even know what I was looking for. Maybe I just wanted to prove myself wrong. What I found was far worse than anything I'd imagined. In her social media, hidden behind privacy settings and tagged photos, were pictures from the party. She wasn't just having harmless fun. She was dancing closely with another man. Her body language open and flirtatious in ways I hadn't seen in years. Her friends had posted stories of them laughing and drinking, but there was one image in particular that broke me. Sarah, leaning in toward this guy, their faces inches apart, eyes locked in a way that made my stomach twist. I knew that look. That was the same look she'd once given me. But that wasn't all. My gut told me there was more, so I did something I'd never done before. I looked at our shared phone account to see her call and text history. There it was, a series of late-night calls and messages exchanged with a number I didn't recognize. A quick search on social media confirmed that the number belonged to the man from the photos. My heart sank, a mix of rage, pain, and disbelief flooding over me. This wasn't just a fun night or a simple swap. This was betrayal, plain and simple. By the time she got home, I was numb, already bracing myself for what would come next. But I knew one thing for sure, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Sarah came home in the early hours of the morning, looking slightly disheveled but with a smug smile on her face. She tried to slip into bed quietly, probably thinking I was asleep. But I was wide awake, lying there, my mind racing with everything I'd seen and discovered. I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Had a good time?" I asked, my voice cold and controlled. She froze for a moment, clearly surprised I was awake. But then she recovered, letting out a casual laugh. "Yeah, it was fun. Just a simple night out with friends. Nothing big." "A simple night out, huh?" I replied, sitting up in bed, my eyes fixed on her. "Did your simple night out include cozying up to another man? Because that's what it looked like to me." Her face went pale for a split second, but she quickly masked it with a defensive sneer. "What are you talking about, James? Are you spying on me now? That's pretty low, even for you." "Oh, don't twist this on me, Sarah," I snapped, feeling my anger bubble up. "I saw the pictures, The ones you thought I wouldn't find. I saw you with him, and I saw the messages. How long has this been going on?" She let out an exasperated sigh, crossing her arms defensively. "James, please. You're being ridiculous. He's just a friend. We were all drinking and having fun. Don't be so paranoid." "Paranoid?" I shot back, incredulous. "You think I'm being paranoid after seeing the way you looked at him? The late-night calls and texts? You've been lying to me for months, haven't you?" Her expression hardened, and she rolled her eyes. "Maybe if you weren't so boring, I wouldn't need to look for excitement elsewhere. You're always wrapped up in work, and you barely even notice me anymore. I deserve to have fun, James. I deserve to feel alive." Her words hit me like a slap to the face. I stood there, stunned by the sheer lack of remorse in her voice. She didn't even try to deny it, didn't try to apologize or explain. Instead, she blamed me, as if I was the reason for her betrayal. "So, this is my fault?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, feeling a mix of rage and heartbreak. "You throw our marriage away, and somehow I'm to blame?" She shrugged, a defiant look in her eyes. "Maybe you are. Maybe you're not enough for me anymore, James. Ever think about that?" At that moment, I knew there was no saving this. The woman I'd loved and trusted for over a decade was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. And as painful as it was, I also knew I couldn't let this slide. I had to show her just how badly she'd underestimated me. After that confrontation, I felt hollowed out. The anger, the betrayal, and the sheer lack of remorse in Sarah's eyes all mixed into something dark and cold inside me. I realized that this marriage was dead, and there was no going back. But I also knew I couldn't let her walk away unscathed, treating me like I was nothing while she moved on to her exciting new life. I started planning. Sarah had always been the type who thrived on admiration and attention. Her birthday was coming up, and she had planned an elaborate party, inviting friends, family, and coworkers. She was practically giddy about it, talking about the perfect outfit she'd wear, the catering, the decorations. She expected me to play the doting husband, to give a loving speech and make her feel like a queen for the night. But I had something else in mind. Over the next few days, I gathered evidence, the screenshots of her messages, the photos of her with the other man, everything that would show the truth of who she'd become. I printed out key messages, the most incriminating ones, on large sheets of paper, and I carefully crafted a gift for her. Framed copies of her infidelity, all ready to be put on display. On the night of her birthday, I helped set up the party as if nothing was wrong. Sarah was in high spirits, blissfully unaware of the storm about to hit. She wore a new dress, hair and makeup done to perfection, and she greeted every guest with a smile, glowing with excitement and basking in the attention. As the evening wore on and everyone was settled, I decided it was time. I took the microphone, pretending I was about to give a heartfelt toast. Sarah looked at me with a smug smile, probably expecting me to shower her with compliments. "Thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate Sarah's birthday," I began, my voice steady but cold. "Sarah, you've always loved surprises, so I thought I'd give you one tonight." I turned to the wall behind me, where I'd secretly set up the posters of her texts and photos earlier in the evening. With one pull, I unveiled them for the entire room to see. Gasps erupted from the guests as they took in the explicit evidence of her betrayal. Sarah's face went pale, her confident smile fading into shock and horror. "And here's one last gift for you," I said, handing her a neatly wrapped box. Inside, she found the framed messages and the flattened wedding ring I'd decided to discard, a symbol of the marriage she'd destroyed. For a moment, the room was dead silent. Then, people began to murmur, exchanging shocked glances, some looking away in embarrassment. Sarah stood there, speechless, her face flushed with shame and anger. I didn't stick around for the fallout. I walked out, leaving her to face the consequences of her actions, surrounded by friends and family who now knew exactly who she was. As I left, I felt a strange sense of peace. It was over, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The next morning, I woke up to a flurry of messages and missed calls. Word had spread fast about what happened at the party, and it seemed like everyone who was there had something to say. Friends, family, even a few of Sarah's co-workers had reached out, some expressing disbelief, others sending words of support. I ignored most of the messages. I didn't feel like rehashing everything, explaining myself, or listening to people's shock. I'd done what I needed to do. I'd given Sarah a taste of the humiliation she'd put me through, and I had no regrets. Sarah, on the other hand, was relentless. She left dozens of voicemails, each one angrier and more desperate than the last. She accused me of ruining her life, of embarrassing her in front of everyone she cared about. Her voice cracked with rage and desperation, but there wasn't a hint of apology or remorse. She didn't reach out to take responsibility, only to blame me for exposing her. The audacity of it all made me laugh. She genuinely thought I was the one who had wronged her. I blocked her number after a few days, unwilling to listen to her toxic ramblings. We had lawyers to sort out the logistics, and there was no reason to have any further communication with her directly. The marriage was done, the divorce proceedings were already in motion, and I had nothing left to say. In the following weeks, I noticed that Sarah's social circle started to shrink. People who had once been close to her distanced themselves after learning what she'd done. She tried to salvage her reputation, spinning the story to make herself look like the victim, claiming I'd overreacted or that I was controlling. But the evidence was there. The messages, the photos, everything that proved she'd betrayed our marriage. The truth was out, and no amount of manipulation could change that. I had my own support system. Friends and family who had always been there for me rallied around, reminding me that I wasn't alone. Some of them had seen Sarah's true colors at the party, while others were just learning about it now. But either way, I felt supported, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel isolated or trapped in a toxic relationship. One evening, my sister came over to talk. She'd been furious when she learned what Sarah had done, but she was also worried about how I was handling everything. "Are you okay?" she asked, looking at me with concern. "That was a pretty big scene. I know you were hurting, but I just want to make sure you're really moving forward, not holding on to this." Her words made me pause. I realized that while the revenge had felt satisfying in the moment, I couldn't let it define my future. I couldn't hold on to the bitterness or let Sarah's betrayal keep haunting me. She was a part of my past, and I was ready to leave her there. "It's over," I told her with a small smile. "I'm done with her. Now it's just about moving forward and building a life that's actually worth something." She nodded, a look of relief on her face. "Good. You deserve that, James. You deserve to be happy again." And in that moment, I knew she was right. With Sarah out of my life and the divorce process underway, I felt an unfamiliar sense of freedom. I hadn't realized how much of my happiness, my peace of mind, had been tied to someone who didn't value or respect me. Now, it was like a weight had been lifted, and I could finally start focusing on what really mattered. Rebuilding my life and finding a sense of purpose beyond the betrayal. The first thing I did was make some changes around the house. I wanted to remove any trace of Sarah from my home, to create a space that felt like my own. I redecorated, got rid of anything that reminded me of her, and even painted a few rooms. The process felt therapeutic, like I was reclaiming my life one brushstroke at a time. I also started spending more time with friends and family. During my marriage, I'd been so focused on keeping Sarah happy, on bending over backward to meet her needs, that I'd neglected some of the relationships that truly mattered. My friends welcomed me back with open arms, and I reconnected with family members I hadn't seen in a while. They were all supportive, reminding me that I was loved and valued, that I was more than the man Sarah had tried to turn me into. One day, Jake, my best friend since college, invited me out for a hiking trip. I'd always enjoyed the outdoors, but it was something I'd put on hold because Sarah didn't like it. The idea of going back to one of my old passions felt like a step toward reclaiming the parts of myself I'd buried for so long. We spent the day hiking through the trails, breathing in the fresh air and taking in the beauty of the mountains. It was refreshing, freeing, and as we reached the summit, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. "This is the guy I remember," Jake said, grinning as he clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Welcome back, James." I laughed, feeling a real smile spread across my face. For the first time in a long time, I felt like myself again. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into things I'd once loved but had abandoned during my marriage. I joined a local running group, signed up for cooking classes, and even started reading more. My life was beginning to feel full again, and for once, I didn't need anyone else to make it that way. And while Sarah was still technically in the picture, dealing with the legalities of the divorce and trying to salvage her reputation, I didn't let her presence in my past overshadow my future. I was moving on, and it felt incredible. It became clear to me that my life wasn't ending because of Sarah's betrayal. It was just beginning. A couple of months passed, and I'd fully embraced my new life. The divorce was close to being finalized, and I was finding joy in things that had nothing to do with my past. I felt stronger, more confident, and truly free from the chains of my marriage. Then, out of the blue, I received a text from Sarah. It was simple and short. "Can we talk? I owe you an apology." At first, I felt a surge of anger. An apology now? After all the destruction, the lies, and the complete lack of remorse she'd shown during our confrontations? Part of me wanted to ignore it, to leave her words unread. But curiosity, or maybe a desire for some form of closure, won out, and I agreed to meet her at a nearby coffee shop. When I arrived, I hardly recognized her. Sarah looked tired, her confident facade diminished, and there was a vulnerability in her eyes that I hadn't seen in years. She seemed smaller somehow, like the weight of her actions had finally caught up to her. "Thank you for meeting me," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to see, but I need to say a few things." I nodded, staying silent, letting her speak. "I messed up, James," she said, her eyes brimming with tears. "I thought I could have everything, that I could play around, and it wouldn't hurt anyone. I thought you'd always be there, no matter what I did. I was selfish, arrogant, and I'm sorry. Truly." The words hung in the air, and I felt a strange sense of calm. The apology I had once craved no longer held power over me. I didn't need her words to validate my experience or my pain. I had already found my own path to healing, and this was just extra. "Thank you for saying that," I replied, my voice steady. "But honestly, I've moved on. I don't need your apology to move forward." She nodded, looking down at her hands. "I know. I just needed to say it, to own up to what I did. I've lost so much, and I realize now that it's all because of my own actions." We sat in silence for a moment. I could tell she wanted me to say something else, to maybe offer forgiveness or sympathy. But I had nothing left to give her. I was done. After a few minutes, I stood up. "Take care of yourself, Sarah." And with that, I left her sitting there, alone, finally feeling free of everything that had once held me back. I didn't hate her anymore. I didn't feel bitterness. All I felt was relief. Relief that I was no longer bound by the past, no longer waiting for her to acknowledge the hurt she'd caused. I had found my peace, and it was time to fully embrace the life that lay ahead. Walking out of that coffee shop, I felt a wave of finality wash over me. Sarah's apology, while overdue, didn't stir the emotions I thought it might. There was no lingering anger or desire for revenge. Instead, I felt lighter, as if her words had finally closed the last chapter of a book I was ready to put down. My focus shifted entirely to my future. For the first time in years, I was living for myself. I threw myself into my hobbies and work, finding joy in small victories. I made an effort to connect with new people, joining a local hiking club, and even trying my hand at photography, something I'd always been curious about but never pursued. One of the most surprising aspects of this new chapter was the peace that came with simplicity. My days were no longer filled with the stress of wondering where Sarah was or whether her words were truthful. My home, now fully my own, had become a sanctuary. I'd redecorated, adding personal touches that reflected who I was and what I valued. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was my home. Friends and family continued to be a huge support. My sister, Emily, who had been my rock throughout the divorce, stopped by one evening with a bottle of wine. "You seem different," she said, settling onto my couch. "Happier. Like you're finally free." "I think I am," I admitted, pouring us both a glass. "It's weird. For so long, I thought getting revenge or hearing an apology would make me feel better. But now that it's all over, I realize I didn't need any of that. I just needed to let go." She raised her glass with a smile. "To letting go." "To letting go," I echoed, clinking my glass against hers. One day, while going through some old photos, I stumbled upon an album from the early days of my marriage. There were pictures of Sarah and me smiling, laughing, and looking happy. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness, not for the person she had become, but for the version of us that had existed in those moments. But instead of lingering on the pain, I closed the album and put it away. That part of my life was over, and I was okay with that. The new version of myself, stronger, wiser, and more resilient, had no room for regret. In this phase of my journey, I realized that freedom doesn't just come from cutting ties with a toxic relationship. It comes from reclaiming your identity, finding strength in your independence, and learning to live for yourself. I had done that, and I wasn't looking back. With each passing day, I found myself more and more excited about the life I was building. The chaos and betrayal that had once consumed me felt like a distant memory, something that had shaped me but no longer defined me. I was finally at peace, and I realized that my happiness was entirely in my own hands. I decided to take things a step further by pursuing something I'd always wanted to do but never had the chance to during my marriage: starting my own business. I'd always had a passion for woodworking, something I'd picked up from my dad when I was a kid. Over the years, it had become a quiet hobby, a way to clear my mind and create something tangible. Now, I wanted to turn that passion into a career. With the encouragement of friends and family, I started small, setting up a workshop in my garage and creating custom furniture and home decor pieces. Word spread quickly, and before I knew it, I had a steady stream of orders coming in. It wasn't just about the work. It was about the satisfaction of building something with my own hands, of creating a life that was truly mine. My kids were a huge part of this journey. I involved them in the process, teaching them how to sandwood, use basic tools, and even letting them paint small projects. It became a bonding experience, something that brought us closer together. They were my biggest cheerleaders, always excited to see what I was working on and eager to help. One evening, as I was finishing up a project, my daughter came into the workshop and handed me a picture she'd drawn. It was a simple sketch of our family, me, her, and her little brother, standing in front of our house. At the bottom, she'd written, "We're happy now." I felt a lump in my throat as I looked at her beaming face. "You like how things are, huh?" I asked, kneeling down to her level. She nodded enthusiastically. "You're happy, Daddy, and that makes me happy." In that moment, I realized just how far I'd come. The pain of the past had been replaced by a deep sense of fulfillment, rooted in the life I was creating for myself and my children. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was ours. Sarah remained a distant figure in our lives. We kept interactions minimal, focused solely on the kids. She occasionally tried to reach out, attempting to bridge some of the distance, but I kept things professional and distant. I didn't harbor anger anymore, but I also had no interest in reopening old wounds. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. One evening, Jake and I sat on the back porch, enjoying a couple of beers. "You're a different man, James," he said, raising his bottle in a mock toast. "You've been through hell, and now look at you. You're living." I laughed, clinking my bottle against his. "Yeah, I guess I am. It's funny, though. I thought losing Sarah would destroy me, but it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened." "To new beginnings," Jake said with a grin. "To new beginnings," I echoed. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over my backyard, I felt a profound sense of contentment. I had rediscovered my purpose, my strength, and my happiness. And for the first time in years, I was excited about what the future might hold. Years after the chaos that had once consumed my life, I could finally say with confidence that I was happy, genuinely, deeply happy. The pain, betrayal, and heartbreak had all become a distant memory, something I had grown from rather than something I still carried. The woodworking business had flourished beyond anything I could have imagined. What had started as a small garage setup turned into a thriving business with a dedicated workshop and even a few employees. I wasn't just building furniture anymore. I was building a legacy, something my kids could one day look back on with pride. My children continued to thrive. They were my greatest joy and my constant reminder of what truly mattered. We had created a home filled with love, laughter, and stability, the very things that had been missing in their earlier years. My relationship with them was stronger than ever, and every moment spent with them was a gift. As for Sarah, she remained a part of our lives, though only in the context of co-parenting. Over time, our interactions became civil, even cordial, but I kept my boundaries firm. She had her life, and I had mine. There was no bitterness left, just a quiet acceptance that our paths had diverged and would never cross again in the way they once had. One day, as I was wrapping up a project in the workshop, my son came in holding a framed photo he'd found in a box of old belongings. It was a picture of Sarah and me from the early days of our marriage, smiling and full of hope. "Do you miss her?" he asked, his innocent eyes searching mine. I paused, considering the question carefully. "I miss who we were back then," I admitted, setting down my tools. "But sometimes people change, and the best thing you can do is let them go and focus on the good things in your life." "Like us?" he asked with a grin. I smiled, pulling him into a hug. "Exactly like you." As I looked around the workshop, at the life I had built from the ashes of betrayal and heartbreak, I realized how far I'd come. I wasn't defined by what had happened to me. I was defined by how I had chosen to rise above it. The man I was now, stronger, wiser, and more grounded, was someone I was proud to be. If there's one piece of advice I could give to anyone going through something similar, it's this. Your life doesn't end with betrayal. It's hard, and it hurts, but it's also an opportunity to rediscover who you are, to rebuild a life that's entirely your own. Don't let someone else's choices dictate your happiness. You have the power to heal, to grow, and to thrive. Looking back, I'm grateful for the lessons I learned. They were hard-earned, but they gave me a life that's authentic, fulfilling, and mine. And as I look forward, I feel nothing but hope. The past may have shaped me, but it doesn't define me. My story is still being written, and I can't wait to see what comes next.